Hello, my name is John, and I'm going to show you how we made Bela, or bread, in the Jemez Pueblo Reservation, New Mexico. I'll start with this pot to give you the ingredients, and before I start, I should probably talk about my family for a second. It's my grandfather and grandmother and my aunt and my two cousins and myself. The back of the Pueblo, this is my grandmother, my two uncles, my aunt, and her son, sitting behind my grandmother. This is my cousin Robert. This is my mother, my father, my two brothers, my grandmother, and myself. I'm on the right. These are my two brothers, my mother, my father, and the new generation of funny people on the planet. This is me on the back of my grandmother's Pueblo, her adobe. Very, very nice piece of property she had. The whole reservation looks like this. Everyone on the res has a stove and, of course, a dog. Everybody has dogs here. This is my Uncle Mike. He just came back from Germany in this picture. He was serving over there. This is the rectory across the street from my grandmother's house. We spent a little bit of time here. And across from this one, but there's no picture, is a school. This is the road going to the Jemez Mountains, and the Jemez Mountains are way out there. This is the Jemez River. Did a lot of fishing and swimming in this river. This river is our lifeline. Once you cross this river, you go over to the Jemez Mesas and the Jemez Mountains. And up in the mountains, there's lots of bear, antelope, deer, all kinds of animals. Me and my uncles and my grandfather used to hunt back here, and I think all we ever got was rabbit. He didn't get a whole ton of big game, but my Uncle Frank did get some big game back here. Very beautiful place. I spent most of my time in this back of this reservation. At the Cultural Center, my grandmother got some work here. Her and my Uncle Gilbert and some of my cousins got work here, and some of my cousins painted the murals at the Cultural Center, and my grandmother and my Uncle Gilbert were commissioned to build 2 bread ovens. And while they were building the 2 bread ovens, they had a bunch of people surrounding them, just watching them build it. And they had they're funny people. They actually started taking the clay and the mud and whipping it at the people and whipping it at themselves. And, they're just funny people. They had a good time. This is my grandmother's oven next to her adobe. And this thing is ancient, hundreds of years old, built with clay and stone. Mine is built out of concrete because I live in Portland, Oregon. It doesn't make any sense to make it out of clay. I constantly have to rebuild it. All right, let's get going and starting these ingredients and getting onto the bread and the cookies. This is my liquid concoction, and these are my dry ingredients. I can't really tell you what's in the liquid. That's a ancient Indian secret, so I'm not going to let you in on that one. So anyway, we start out with flour, salt, and yeast. And once my wet ingredients are ready, we start adding that to the flour. And we beat everything together. It takes me maybe 10 minutes to beat the dough and get it all ready. And once I get this going and ready, I put this off to the side to rise. And it takes pretty much a full day. So what I do is I try to make this the night before I start my oven. And it normally takes me, I'm going to make about maybe 16 to 20 loaves of bread. And I'll also make some cookies too to go in the oven too. As the oven cools down, I like to put cookies in there. And the cookies we make are Indian cookies, and they're called Biscochitos. Very, very tasty sugar cookies, or some would say anise cookies, but they're sugar cookies and anise. Bread that I am making is the same bread that my mother made, my grandmother made, and my great-grandmother made. The recipe has never changed. It's just like they did it. Like I say, it takes a minute to rise. Here's the bread rising. And what we'll do is take the bread out of this, cut it in half, and start putting it in pans. My grandmother never used pans. Her oven was so big and so wide, she was able just to throw her bread in there and pull it out. But I don't like to get the bottom of my bread blackened, so I like to put them in pans. Here we are starting the fire. Get this fire going, and once we get the fire going, it's going to take us about probably 3 to 5 hours to get it heated up. It's so wet here in Portland, and my oven is so damp that we really need to get this fire cooking for a little while. So, it's going to take me a little longer than I really want to, but that's just living here in Portland. That's what you get. So once we get the wood all cut up, which is apple wood and some mesquite and a little bit of softwood just to start the fire. Apple wood and the mesquite will get this thing going really hot, but that's also what's going to flavor the bread. The bread's going to taste a little bit mesquite-y, appley. It's just a great flavor. Once the oven dries out and all the wood burns down, we'll start taking the embers out and putting it into my other fireplace, and we'll actually have a fire in that while we're cooking bread. Stay warm. It's a little chilly out. So after we get this all out, what I try to do is I sweep it and then I mop it. And once I mop it out, it keeps the bottom clean. I could just put the bread in just like that with no pans, but I don't like the ash on the bottom, like I said. So what I do is I get that all cleaned out, get my pans of bread in there, and I want the oven to be about 450 degrees. What I do is I put in a corn husk. And if the corn husk starts on fire, the bread obviously can't go in. So I just wait, and once the corn husk sits there and does not burn, I can go ahead and start putting my bread in, which is, of course, what you see here. I got my bread all cooking in. It took about 40 minutes. During the summertime, this normally takes about 25 minutes. It's just because it's so damp out. So the time on your oven's a little bit longer during this time of year than it is in the summertime, just because of the dampness. My bread's coming out fantastic. It looks really good. I'll let that sit for a while, and I'll get another batch of bread inside there. My grandmother always taught me that when I do this to use a long shovel so I don't burn my face off. These are cookies that we're making. This is the next batch that's going into the oven after I get the bread going. And these cookies are called Biscochitos. They're sugar cookies with anise. Very, very old recipe from my grandmother, great-grandmother, and so on. Very, very good cookies. These are the kind of cookies where you cook them, and after they're done cooking, you have to let them sit for about 3 days to harden up. And use them with your tea, your milk, coffee, whatever. Or just eat them. I just like to eat them. They're pretty good. But you do want them to harden up. It's a very, very neat cookie. Normally, the reason why they make these is for treats for the feast time. During feast time, the village gets together, gets their ovens going, and cooks as much food as they can possibly cook. That's tamales, enchiladas, bread, cookies. And why they do this in the big ovens is because all the families go around to each adobe and they eat there. And so as all these people are going around, you should have enough food because of the amount that you just cooked in these ovens. And these Biscochitos are just a great memory for me. This is my mother load. This is where I got 16 loaves of bread, a bunch of Biscochitos, and I'll be eating these cookies in about 3 days. The bread came out so good. I'll cut up a couple slices. Let's see how the bread came out. Oh yeah. Yep, just like Grandma and my mother made. And what's funny is each person always says they make the best bread. I don't know if my bread's the best, but I know I sure like it, and my kids like it, and my friends like it. In this last picture is my mother in the background standing with my grandmother on the top of ruins. I can't thank these two women enough for what they have taught me throughout life, especially bread making, and now I can teach the next generation how to do things like they do.